Hello and welcome back to the Property Pilot. Today we're talking about single lets versus HMOs and which are better suited for your property portfolio. Welcome back. I was supposed to be flying today, but the weather's absolutely atrocious, so I thought, what's better to make a couple of videos about how to invest in property. And specifically in this video, we're talking about single lets versus HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. So which is better, what's going to earn you a better return? There's no right or wrong here, and people have a strong preference, which we'll come on to very shortly. Okay, let's go on to the definitions. So single let or HMO properties, a really good question, a question that I get asked all the time. And I've got experience in both these types of properties. So I've got HMOs myself and I've got single lets. And I think I'm quite experienced in these sectors. So I'll be able to deliver value and answer the question that you're looking to be answered, whether to go with single lets or houses of multiple occupancy. So first of all, let's define what they actually are. And we'll start off with a single let. Well, a single let is nice and easy. It's a single property. You buy it, you rent it out, maybe it's going to a single person, a couple, family, something like that. But you're letting that property to a single tenant. What you're not doing is letting the property to multiple tenants and letting it on maybe a room basis. So that comes on very nicely to HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. Now these are by definition a household or a dwelling where three or more unrelated people are living together. So that's three or more unrelated people living under the same roof in the same property. So this could be maybe, a group of 4 students living in a property for the academic year. They each have a bedroom, but they share the communal areas like bathrooms, kitchens, or they could even have their own ensuite bathrooms. Also, you could have maybe a young professional house share where maybe each room is let individually on a 6 or 12-month tenancy. And again, all the communal areas are shared. So that's what a HMO is. And let's get back to the office and let's talk about the pros and cons of each. So the pros and cons of single lets and the pros and cons of HMOs. So let's talk about single lets first, and then we're going to come on to HMOs. So single lets, what are the pros and the advantages of single let, buy-to-let properties? First of all, number one, they are easier and cheaper to finance. And what I mean by this is lenders and mortgage lenders and banks will offer you a better rate on a single let property as opposed to a house of multiple occupation. And there's a number of reasons for this, but essentially it breaks down to income. Well, HMOs, you typically make more income through a HMO, and obviously the lender knows this. So as a result, they can increase that rate to you because they know even with that increase in rate, you're still making more money than what you would do on a single buy-to-let property. So obviously they want a larger slice of the pie. Now there are other things as well. HMOs are generally seen as higher risk compared to single lets. And of course, because something is higher risk, then the lender will increase their interest rate to reflect this. As I said before, mortgages are easier to obtain on single let properties. And again, there are lots of lenders in the market for single let properties, whereas you come to the HMO side, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot to choose from, but there aren't as many lenders offering on HMO mortgages compared to single buy-to-let mortgages. HMOs are seen as more of a niche and specialist thing, but nowadays, again, they're very commonplace, and there are a lot of mainstream lenders that will lend on houses of multiple occupation, so don't let that put you off. Another positive of single lets is typically they are less stress and easier and take less time to manage. And the reason for this is because they're a single let property, there is only one family or 1 or 2 people living in this property, as opposed to a HMO where you have 4 or 5, 6 or 7 unrelated people all living in the same dwelling. And because of that very nature, single lets take less time, less hassle and less energy to actually manage and to maintain, both in terms of if you're managing it yourself personally, or if you're doing any maintenance on the property, there'll be less wear and tear because there are less people in the property. So all this means is it will take far less time for you as an investor or a managing agent, if you're managing yourself, to manage, own and maintain a single let property. Okay, another positive of single lets is the fact that the tenants in those types of properties tend to stay far longer than those in houses of multiple occupation. And the reason this is a single let is more of a kind of medium to long-term place to stay. So think about it, it could be, a couple there living there for 3 or 4 years before they're buying their own property. It could be, say, a family living there for 10 years, again before they, built up savings to buy again their property, something like that. Whereas a HMO could be literally, students just studying in that area and they're needing a place for 10, 12 months, something like that. Or it could be a young professional, they're on a graduate scheme and every 6 months they rotate across the UK in different locations like I did. So they're only wanting that room for 6 months. So again, single lets, they're typically easier because, you let it once, you don't forget about it, but normally speaking, that tenant is going to be in there for years rather than months. So I've given you 3 main advantages of single lets. Let's come on to the disadvantages of single lets. Well, the biggest one, and especially when you compare it to houses of multiple occupation, is the return. So a single let property, typically speaking, does not deliver that high return that HMO will yield. And again, the reason for this is a single let is let to, a single or 2 people within a dwelling, whereas a HMO is let to 4, 5, 6, 7 plus people. And of course, they're going to pay more than the 1 or 2 people living in that single let. So that's a big negative, the fact that your returns may not be as high in a single let buy-to-let compared to a HMO. Another disadvantage of a single let property is they're typically in more demand than a HMO. And as a result, you could be competing with a lot of investors to try and acquire this single buy-to-let property. I mean, I remember, I really like single lets. I remember in 2021 and 2020 as well, the competition to acquire single lets was absolutely crazy. I mean, even booking in a viewing was very, very difficult. So, everyone is looking to get into property and they do this by buying single let buy-to-let properties, which is great and what I recommend doing. But because of this, demand is really high and it's really hard to actually acquire a single let property. So you could be putting in loads of time and loads of effort only to acquire maybe a couple of single let properties. Whereas on the HMO side, it's slightly a bit more niche, it's a bit more specialist, and it takes a bit more skill set to understand and manage and maintain HMO when compared to a single let property. Another disadvantage of a single let property is the aspect of time. So if you're looking to scale your property portfolio journey in the fastest possible time, go from 0 to 10 in a year or something like that, well, because we've already identified that single let properties deliver a lower return typically than houses of multiple occupation, then it will take you longer to hit your goal and to hit your target if you're just solely focusing on single let properties. Whereas if you're going on HMOs, you could be generating a nice monthly income through the income investing strategy by acquiring HMOs. So I think we've spoken about single lets in some good detail. Let's move on to HMOs. Let's come on to the advantages first of all, and the positives and the pros of buying a HMO property. So the first, we've already mentioned it, is the actual return that HMO will deliver. HMOs typically generate a higher return when compared to single let properties. And again, we've already identified why this is, because there are essentially more people living in that building paying you rent. So again, really good if you're undergoing an income investing strategy and you want to maximize that monthly cash coming to you on a monthly basis. HMOs are really good for this. Another positive of houses of multiple occupation is in some areas the demand is absolutely huge. So what I mean by this, let's say a new employer moves to the area. I don't know, take Leeds for example, when Channel 4 moved to Leeds. Well, there's a huge demand for specific types of accommodation, not only HMOs, but say flats and things like that. So you can actually strategically buy HMOs in areas where that demand is very, very high, and you can have that offering for people that are looking for houses of multiple occupation. But not only that, but premium HMOs. So ones that are done to a 9, a 10 out of 10 standard. So, done to a really good standard. Maybe that involves also your own ensuite as well. So maybe you've got a HMO with 5 or 6 rooms. They all have their own ensuites. And because of that, you can command a premium in rent. So again, HMOs are really good for those areas that have really strong demand. Okay, another positive, which is also a negative when it comes to HMOs, is the Article 4 direction. And for those of you who don't know what this is, I've got a video telling you all about Article 4 and the strategy to actually undergo around Article 4. And I'll link to this in the description. Here's a thumbnail so you can clearly find the video. It's got a bit of a clickbaity title, I do apologise, but it's actually true. I've made some serious chunks of cash through undergoing this particular strategy around Article 4. But what Article 4 essentially does is it prevents people from buying properties and converting them into HMOs because this removes your permitted development rights. Now again, if you're buying in areas where Article 4 is not yet established, or maybe it hasn't expanded into that particular area, that's great because you can buy this house, turn it into a HMO, and you're going to add significant value to that property just by doing so. So find these areas that don't have Article 4 in place and consider changing a house from a C3 to C4 HMO property. Again, this is also a negative as well, so let's come on to this right now and let's talk about the negatives of HMOs. Well, in fact, if you're looking to do this in some areas of the UK, in fact most areas where you want to do this, you'll have an Article 4 direction which prevents you from taking a normal house, a family house, a C3 dwelling, and converting it into a C4 HMO property. Your permitted development rights essentially will be removed through this Article 4 direction. So what that means is you have to buy a ready-made HMO that's been used as a HMO prior to the introduction of Article 4. So really, you can't create that much value in terms of capital in the building, but what you're doing is you're buying a ready-made HMO that's cash flowing and it's going to give you that monthly income. So it's both a negative and a positive, I suppose, in terms of what you're looking to achieve, whether it's just monthly income or you're looking to add significant value to a property by turning it into a HMO. Now, another negative of HMOs, which we've already spoken about, is the time element. It does take more time to manage and to maintain a HMO. People stay there less than a single let, 6 months, 12 months, something like that. So you will be doing tenancy changeovers far more often than single let properties. Also, you're more likely to encounter disputes and fallouts in HMOs, as maybe you have, 4, 5, 6, 7 unrelated people living under the same roof. There will be fallouts and disagreements, and sometimes you'll have to step in and, make things happen and maybe you have to remove a tenant from the situation, evict a tenant, or maybe you can come to some other form of agreement. So HMOs are more time. And as a result, they're more stress. Again, people handle stress better than others, but HMOs typically are more stress when you're managing it yourself. So, if management isn't your skill set and you're not best suited to that, consider finding a managing agent to manage your HMOs. Now, some agents will charge a slight premium for managing HMOs because, again, they're more time. So, they need to be compensated fairly for their time. So some will charge between 10 and 15% plus VAT to manage a HMO. And again, because that HMO is generating a higher income than single lets, normally you can afford to pay this and you're still making some really good money. Now, another negative in terms of HMOs is actually when you come to sell this property. A lot of investors don't think about this negative, but when you're selling a HMO property, well, really it only appeals to investors when you're selling this property. And what that means is you're completely excluding the owner-occupier side of the market that are looking to buy a house for themselves and for their family. So, because of this, you're only appealing to investors, which is okay, but what you're not doing is you're not allowing the whole market to come to you. Now, another negative of HMOs is the legislation required to actually manage a HMO within the law. So again, there's a lot more to managing a HMO than managing a single let. A single let, someone can pick it up fairly easy how to manage a single let. There's only so much health and safety that goes into it, and it can be taught. It's very, very simple. Whereas a HMO, there's far more legislation that you need to actually abide by. You've got HMO licensing, and every 5 years that needs to be renewed. And you need to be a competent person and understand the rules and the regs to managing a HMO. And if you don't, again, that's one reason why you should consider giving it to a managing agent that specialises in HMOs. Another negative is they are more expensive to buy and more costly to refurb. Of course, because generally these properties may be slightly bigger, but also you have to spend a bit more money on them to actually properly cater for 4+ people living in the same dwelling. Things are going to wear and tear far quicker in a HMO than a single let. So you want to be putting in really good quality flooring that's not going to wear after a couple of years. You want to be buying appliances for the kitchen that are going to last you 5-10 years or not die after 2 years. So it's going to cost you more to refurb, it's going to cost you more to buy, but don't let this put you off, because that's going to put off a lot of investors just because the cost to get into this industry is somewhat higher than single lets. Please don't let this put you off. So again, another negative, which I've already mentioned in the positive of a single let, is typically you'll be paying more on your mortgage for a HMO, and they're slightly harder to mortgage as there are less lenders in the market that offer HMO products. Now, there are enough lenders in the market offering mortgages on HMO, so don't worry about that. You will just be paying slightly more than a single let property. So, a lot of negatives of HMOs, but again, please don't let this put you off. Let me just summarize and tell you kind of what my opinion is anyway. Now, I've got both. I've got HMOs and I've got single lets. And I started off more so on the HMO side. This really resonated with me as a young professional. Back in the day, I was moving on every 6 months with my FTSE 100 role, and I stayed in I think 6 or 7 HMOs, and I really understood how HMO worked, and I understood what it took to run a successful HMO. So that's how I started. Again, I did have single lets when I started as well, but really my focus and my attention was acquiring HMOs at really good prices. Now, fast forward to where I am now 10 years later, I still like HMOs, but I much prefer other types of property strategies. For me, HMOs, they are more hassle. Don't get me wrong, it takes you more time, more energy, and more effort to let a HMO. And now at my point in my career, my time's really important. Time is the most important asset you've got ahead of money. And for me, I don't want to be spending time, and my team doesn't want to be spending time managing HMOs. We want to be looking at other types of more active property strategies. Now, single lets are really good for those that are looking to get into property because they're very easy to undergo, very easy to explain, and they take not a lot of time. So if you're only looking to maybe contribute half a day, a week towards property, then single lets are pretty good. But saying that, HMOs are great for cash. So if you really want cash and you want cash quickly, HMOs are a really good strategy to undergo. So I hope this video has been really good. It's given you the pros and cons on single lets versus HMOs, and only you can decide what you want to do and what types of properties you want to invest in. Even do both. You don't have to choose one. You could do both like I did. They both serve a purpose, and it would be a nice way to balance your portfolio and having different types of property within your portfolio. So, are you looking for help, acquiring and buying single let and HMOs properties? Maybe you need a little help with your strategy and you want all the tactics and the process behind buying at really good prices and how to manage and maintain this property going forward. Head to my website www.ms7.uk and book a call with me. I'm very passionate, as you can probably tell, about helping people invest in property and scale a property portfolio. Take care and enjoy your day.